Scott Ritter, and I. We started out, I suppose, in quite different political places. Now we're brothers in arms. We're brothers in arms for peace, which can be a pretty bloody position to be in. He joins us now again. Scott, great to talk to you again. There's so many wars that I need to talk to you about. I almost daren't digress into the farce in the United States over the Epstein affair. I was arguing with your friend and mine, Garland Nixon, earlier, that this will not succeed. This obfuscation, this refusal to obey the decisions of the Congress on the timing and the extent of disclosure and so on, and then this ludicrous plastering of every page of thousands and thousands of pages rendered indecipherable by the simple application of printer's ink in the name of redaction. I don't think that's going to work. Do you?
You know, I'm conventionally, no, it shouldn't work. The American people should be outraged and should put pressure on their elected representatives to seek the truth, because the crimes that are alleged are crimes that no society can tolerate. And, you know, on a scale that appears to be mind-boggling. But I've lost faith in the American people to differentiate between right and wrong. We now have a politicized citizenry who seems to have jettisoned, basic, ethical norms and values in favor of, partisanship, political partisanship. We have a literal cult of personality in power today, a literal cult of personality. I mean, this is a man who he violates the law on a regular basis. And one of the most recent violations is the renaming of the John F. Kennedy Center as the Trump John F. Kennedy. It's an absolute violation of the law. And why would he do this? This is a man who's so narcissistic that in order to, keep the World Cup alive, FIFA had to give him a peace prize that they manufactured out of thin air just to assuage his ego. And this is a man who, under normal circumstances, should be run out of town, tarred and feathered on a plank. But instead, we've elevated him, we, the collective American people who are, in his political orbit, we've elevated him to some sort of saint-like figure that literally will sit in the White House, bow his satanistic head while people, ostensibly Christians, lay hands on him as if he is a conduit to the Lord Almighty, a vector of biblical power and proportion. So I think actually that Trump is going to get away with this because he has infected American democracy with the sickness of the cult of personality.
We've been together so long, Scott, you've begun to read my mind, because you literally took some of the words, many of them, that I was going to put to you. There can never have been a more debased Elmer Gantry figure than Donald Trump, and yet there he is kissing the wall of a Roman structure in Jerusalem that Jesus declared to be the product of apostasy, called for it to be torn down. He said that what Levin said on the Hanukkah affair, that he was the first Jewish president, he said twice, it's true, it's true. Was it literally true? Who knows? In other circumstances, who would care? But the point I'm trying to make is these people are never done wearing the Sacred Heart on their sleeve. They're never done telling us what Christians they are, when in fact they blaspheme daily against the Lord, and they practice what is, you called it satanic, it's definitely heathen idea of what they call Judeo-Christianity. You and I are about to celebrate Christmas. The people who are the Judeo part of that equation, they don't celebrate Christmas. They believe that Jesus is boiling in a pit of his own excrement. They believe that Jesus' mother, Holy Mary, was a prostitute, and that Jesus' father was a passing Roman soldier. Well, I'm a Christian, so I'm not a Judeo-Christian. And I don't know if these people who keep talking like that even know the blasphemy of which they speak. But laying on of hands, speaking in tongues, to a guy guilty of just about every sin known to man, and it would appear one or two hitherto not known to man. It's really a rum affair, isn't it?
It is, George. I yearn for the day in America where we didn't pretend to have a state religion. It's prohibited by the Constitution. I come from a generation where religion was a private affair. You went to church on Sunday or you didn't go to church on Sunday. You took catechism or you didn't take catechism. You read the Torah or you didn't read the Torah. No one cared because it was your business. Your relationship with a supreme being was personal and private and protected. Today, we live in an America that has, allowed the notion of a state religion to be incorporated into a state ideology, this Judeo-Christian perversion. And I agree with you. I'm not here to denigrate any religion. I'm not going to do that. I will say this though, keep it out of my God. I almost swore there. Keep it out of my country. Okay, my Constitution protects your right to have a religion. You keep your religion out of my Constitution. You keep your religion out of my daily life. You keep your religion out of my life. That's just the way it's got to be. Instead, we have a class of people now who have empowered themselves politically, people like Ted Cruz, who portends to be a Christian, but says that he chose the political life he is leading today because of the need to defend Israel and to defend the Jewish faith. These are people who believe in the rapture. They believe in the book of Revelations as a literal manifestation of God's will on earth. And it may be. I'm not here to question them except to say the following. If God is indeed an all-powerful being, he doesn't need Ted Cruz's help to bring on Armageddon. If God is all power, all knowing, all seeing, God will bring Armageddon onto the humankind when God wants to. And he doesn't need the help of Ted Cruz or anybody else who is promulgating Christian Zionism in the hope of speeding up Armageddon. That basically says you believe in nothing. If you believe that you can encourage the coming of the rapture, you are saying that God is not all powerful. God is not all seeing. God is not all everything, that you are more powerful, God. And there's nothing more satanistic than the notion of man being more powerful than God. And yet today in America, we are governed by people who seem to believe just that.
Amen. I've actually been to Armageddon, Scott. It's not that far, maybe 80 kilometers or so from the Gaza Strip. It's a hell of a place, and it's not somewhere or something I am myself keen to revisit. But turning to these wars, we'll not have time, although you're always generous, to discuss them all. But is it really true that Netanyahu is pressing Donald Trump to back another Israeli attack on Iran? And if so, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Yes, it appears that the Israelis are taking umbrage at Iran's efforts to reconstitute legitimate uranium enrichment programs and processes that were destroyed during the 12-day war. You have the ongoing refurbishment of Natanz. You have the Iranians seeking to investigate the Ferdo underground uranium enrichment facility to see what damage was done there and what can be recovered. This is the legitimate right of a sovereign state that was carrying out actions that are permissible under the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, actions that were, at the time of their destruction, fully monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency's safeguards program. So Israel has taken umbrage because Israel has decided that Iran, the law, international law, does not apply to Iran, that Israel gets to dictate, the legal realities that Iran must operate in. And now that Iran is not playing the game, submitting to the will of America and Netanyahu when it comes to its nuclear program, Israel is talking about finishing the job. What could go wrong? Everything. Let's just remind everybody that the 12-day war ended when Netanyahu got on a panicked phone call with Donald Trump and begged the United States to bring an end to this conflict because the Iranian missiles were starting to bring about real pain, real suffering. It was exposing the real fact that Israel could not defend itself, regardless of the fact that everybody in the world had rallied around Israel and was providing multiple layers of ballistic missile defense, the most sophisticated in the world, by the way. They couldn't stop the Iranian missiles. The Iranian missiles today are more numerous and of a higher quality than the ones that were fired against Israel during the 12-day war. Iran has reconstituted its ballistic missile production capability. It is producing some of those advanced missiles known to mankind today. And if Israel were to resume military operations against Iran, this would not be a 12-day drawn-out affair. This would be a conflict that would end in a matter of hours, if not just a few days. Iran understands. They learned a lot from the first 12-day war, and they know what Israel is capable of, and they know what they are capable of, and they will seek to bring Israel to its knees in a much quicker timeline than what happened before. I think the good news is that the United States recognizes this reality and will be doing everything it can to keep Netanyahu in his cage.
Yeah, you'll probably have a price, though, for staying in his cage, and your long-suffering taxpayers know what I'm talking about. Now, I just saying to Garland, I feel a bit of a chump because I was not certain, but near certain that Donald Trump would not invade Venezuela. I'm not as certain today. Are you?
Man, it makes no sense on any level. Militarily, we're not going to invade Venezuela. We don't have the resources to invade Venezuela. We have the ability to carry out limited military strikes. We, of course, have the ability to do, standoff strikes of strategic locations using, bombers and aircraft and such. But we don't have the ability to meaningfully put boots on the ground. We can seize radio stations. We can seize presidential palaces. We could do things of this nature, but that's short term. We can't sustain that. We can't, go in with 4,000 Marines and call it a day. We'd have to follow up with 40,000 Marines, then 100,000 Marines, and then 700,000 American soldiers that we just simply don't have. So there's that. Then there's any Venezuela operation conducted with boots on the ground will fail. And this will be the end of the Trump administration's presidency. Yes, he's a 4-year president, but we have midterm elections coming up. And if Donald Trump gets us involved in a quagmire in Venezuela, that's the end of the Trump presidency. The opposition, no matter how unorganized they are right now, will regain power in Congress. And then Trump will be paralyzed with impeachment after impeachment after impeachment because he is a criminal and they will impeach, even though they may not throw him out of office. And he has to know this. And so hopefully that will be a restraint on his actions as well. The only chance he has of removing Maduro from power and achieving changes through covert action. But again, you don't want a Bay of Pigs type covert action. You need a successful covert action. And I don't believe the CIA is prepared to do that at this time. And so I continue to believe, despite everything I'm hearing and seeing and reading, that Donald Trump is not stupid enough to invade Venezuela or carry out large-scale military operations against Venezuela, because it will be the end of the Trump presidency. And this man is the supreme narcissist who doesn't want his legacy to be that of, a man who has been impeached 2 or 3 more times. And let's make it very clear, too. Given the fact that Donald Trump has politicized political retribution, he's operationalized it. Donald Trump has to be careful, because if the wrong people, from Trump's perspective, seize executive power in 2028, Donald Trump's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. And he has to know this. So I'm hopeful that he and the people who are dependent upon his political success understand there will be dire, indeed fatal consequences to him politically if he moves against Venezuela.
Now, a person we both used to admire somewhat, Tulsi Gabbard, now the Director of National Intelligence, therefore in a key position in the deep state, yesterday denounced the deep state for seeking to drag the United States deeper and deeper into a war with Russia in the Ukraine. She scolded, more than scolded, she excoriated Reuters for publishing lies. She called them actual lies about Russian intentions, Russian ability to carry out fake intentions. She really gave them the works, and full marks to her for that. I continue to believe, and I will until the world goes up in nuclear smoke, that we've got more chance of ending the danger of World War III in the Ukraine with Trump's administration than we ever would have with the Kamala Harris administration. I still hold to that. Many don't like that I do, but I still hold to that. And I'm hoping that Tulsi Gabbard was speaking with her master's voice in this. Do you think she was?
I do actually believe that Tulsi Gabbard is speaking in, not just with his voice, but with his consent. Look, as you have heard me say in the 2 previous segments of this show about the cult of personality and about Venezuela, anybody who thinks I'm up here carrying Donald Trump's water hasn't the foggiest clue what they're talking about. I don't carry his water or anybody's water.
Me too.
But I am a proponent of avoiding nuclear Armageddon with Russia and promoting better relations between the United States and Russia. I believe it is the principal policy direction that the United States should be pursuing at this time, and it's where I am putting the bulk of my effort at this time. And having said that, Donald Trump is going up against the deep state. He's going up against, Europe. He's going up against economic forces that have tied their future to the Ukraine conflict, and it's difficult for him because he isn't as strong a leader as people would like to believe he is. He is a man who, when physically confronted by people, he wilts like a flower in hot water. So what's happened here is that he has empowered people like Marco Rubio and others, Keith Kellogg, Scott Bessent, the director of the CIA, whose name is skipping my mind right now, Mike Radcliffe, I think.
Patel.
These are Russophobes. These are people who hate
Patel.
Russia and have been promoted. Yeah, and they just hate Russia. So, Trump has a hard time, putting them down, confronting them, etc. And what happens is they start promulgating lies. I mean, the CIA, I just want people, again, just to reflect on this. As Donald Trump was going to meet with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, the CIA's senior Russian expert was briefing him on an airplane at the direction of the CIA director. This Russian expert, a lady, was the national intelligence officer for Russia in 2016, and she spearheaded the effort to smear Donald Trump as a Russian agent. She despises Donald Trump. She hates Donald Trump. And yet there she was briefing Donald Trump in preparation for the biggest summit meeting that, has taken in recent times. And she did this with the full permission of a CIA director who whitewashed her account months prior in June, before Tulsi Gabbard released the truth about what had happened in 2016 and the false accusations put out. Radcliffe published his own 5-page declassified paper that sought to whitewash the CIA's culpability and whitewash the involvement of this particular lady. So this is what Donald Trump's dealing with. And the CIA is actively releasing information to outlets like Reuters through people like Keith Kellogg that are designed to, promote a specific narrative that is, undermining everything Donald Trump's trying to achieve right now. This is a very difficult problem for Donald Trump. I mean, solving the Ukraine conflict is not an easy problem. He has the political will. Look, this man published a national security strategy for all the people that hate Donald Trump, and there are many. Read that document. And I know you're not going to be happy with China, and you're definitely not going to be happy with Western, the Western Hemisphere, and the New Monroe Doctrine and the Trump corollary to the doctrine. Yes, there's problems in this, but the thing that can kill us all is Russia, and Russia is no longer listed as an enemy or adversary. Russia is listed as a partner of strategic stability. We are on the right direction. This time last year, we were talking about a greater than 50% chance of a nuclear war between Russia and the United States. Today, the official policy line of the United States is that Russia is a strategic partner of international stability. We're headed in the right direction. We have to give Donald Trump, this narcissist, this weak man, a fighting chance. And Tulsi Gabbard, I believe, now is giving voice to some of the big problems. There is a deep state, this permanent bureaucracy of intelligence and defense officials linked to the military-industrial complex and Congress, who don't want peace, who profit off of war, endless wars. Well, these endless wars are going to kill us because they will lead to a nuclear war. Chris Donahue, the commander of U.S. forces in Europe, the senior NATO commander, 4-star general, recently talked about Kaliningrad and said, if NATO wanted to, of course, they could take Kaliningrad, a Russian territory, the former Königsberg territory of East Prussia that Russia received at the end of the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. He said, we could take it out, and we will in a future war. Well, a Chinese online portal using data from U.S. war games and overlaying that with the current strategic thinking of, notable Russian strategists like Sergei Karaganov, said, yeah, if NATO and the United States attacks Kaliningrad within 5 hours, 35 to 60 million Europeans will be killed, and all of Europe will be destroyed. I don't want that. Nobody should want that. And yes, that's the direction we're heading if we let this deep state continue to prevent the bringing to a close this tragic conflict in Ukraine.
I saw that quote and I retailed it, and I urged my audience to remember the name Kaliningrad, because it might be the last word on our lips. We truly are on the edge of the apocalypse. Let's just repeat it, if you will, Scott. In 5 hours, 35 to 50 million European citizens would be dead, and Europe would be completely destroyed if NATO's threats to Kaliningrad were to be carried out. I mean, you and I are of a generation, me more than you, but you also, and you professionally were engaged in it, to fear the outbreak of nuclear war, knowing that it would existentially change, and at least in North America and Europe, it would be the end of humanity. And yet these jokers with their gold lanyards on their shoulders, weighing them, pulling them to one side, a kilo of gold leaf on their uniforms. They are daily pronouncing this kind of madness. And nobody, you said you'd lost faith in the American people. I'm beginning to lose faith in all people, in humanity, because how can it be that you can hear your military leaders making such threats, know what the potential consequences could be, and yet you remain calm and unprotesting? I simply don't understand it.
I don't either, George. It's mind-boggling to me. Last year in November, a man named Thomas Buchanan, he was is the director of plans, an admiral, Navy admiral, director of plans for Strategic Command. That means he does the nuclear war planning. He writes the nuclear war plan. He's familiar with the nuclear war plan. He spoke to a think tank, CSIS, about the current status. And when asked a question, his answer about, is Russia bluffing? Could there be a nuclear war with Russia, et cetera? He said, we are ready to fight. Again, the words he used was to enter into a nuclear exchange with Russia that we would win. And he defined victory in stark terms, meaning that we would end this conflict with sufficient nuclear strike capability to still dominate the nuclear balance of power in the world after we destroyed Russia and by extension China. Because I just want to remind people that there's a new nuclear employment plan that was promulgated under the Biden administration, initiated under the previous Trump administration, that says because China's nuclear arsenal is expanding, we can't leave it untouched in case of a nuclear war with Russia, because the potential then with China would retain more nuclear weapons than we have. So if we go to nuclear war with Russia, we will simultaneously destroy China, because we have to in order to retain our victory status of having more nuclear weapons left after a nuclear war than anybody else. But then he said something interesting, and it's something that people should follow up on. He said, maybe it's time we be honest with the American people about what winning a nuclear war would look like. Because in short, the democracy we call America will no longer exist. American democracy will be over. The people who survive will live under a permanent military dictatorship. There will be no free market. Everything will be rationed. Life as you know it will cease to exist. And I'm somebody who joined the military to defend the Constitution, defend the American way of life. And the idea that I would willingly embark on an enterprise that I knew that even if we won, it would mean the death of the nation I am sworn to defend. Why in God's name would I ever enter into that, down that path? And this is what people need to reflect. I'm writing a big article right now. I hope to finish it soon. That touches on this. So we are at an existential moment in our respective societies and in humanity. And this is the question we have to ask. And Europeans need to ask themselves, is it worth everything what you're doing in Ukraine? Are you willing to sacrifice everything? Because you will not win this war. And if you live, you will wish you had died. Why are you doing this? What values are you defending when you embark on a course of action that is inherently and inevitably suicidal to the very cause that you purport to support? Democracy, the European Union, this wonderful experiment in humanity will all cease to exist even if you win. Why? People have to start asking this question. Why do they support this outcome?